Hi folks, lecture starting up any minute now. Just getting myself all set up on my end. Oh yeah, I think it's all streaming, everything looks live, that's great. Get my browser up. I've got everything organized over at this end. G'day everybody. Welcome to lecture B of week 5 of Comp 1720/6720, streaming live to you from the interwebs. Thank you so much for joining me live. If you're watching online, if you're catching up later, that's great too. If you're joining me live online, jump into the chat and say hi. Send me a weird GIF. You know, there is a GIF keyboard in Microsoft Teams, but I don't see too many folks using it. So get in with the GIFs today. That would be great. We've got a few GIFs to show you in today's lecture, actually, so that'll be fun. Some animated things. Well, we've made it now to week 5. We've made it through all of the code topics of Comp 1720. And we're now starting to touch on what I feel like is the real important topic of this course, which is interactive art or interactivity in art. We've covered code or art lectures that cover some of the aspects of art that you have come into contact with in P5, different colors, forms, materials, what even is art. And now we're looking at the interactive part. And I'll tell you in a moment why this is so important. But this is the topic of today's lecture. What is interactive art in general? This is the main thing we're going to start looking at. To understand that question, we need to know what art is. We've already discussed this one. We've come up with some different conclusions as to what is art. As you know, I'm a pretty open-ended kind of person when it comes to a definition of art. I think that lots of things can be art. It's often art is just what people decide is art. If there's a consensus that it's art, then it is. But I think we came to discuss the idea that artistic things have to have this going beyond aspect. So they have a certain je ne sais quoi that is in excess, an excess of that. So they're going beyond the normal expectations of aesthetics, of functionality, of interest, of appeal to people, and of interaction with their environment. So we looked at lots of different artworks and we discussed what is art. We'll talk a bit today about what is interaction and try to put those two things together. What is interactive art? We'll also talk a little bit about how we can design interactions in P5. And this won't be so much about writing lines of code in P5, but what you have to think about when you are making code in P5 in order to make something interactive. I guess in some way this is the part of the course where I don't have to give you as many code examples because you already know how to do it. You know how to draw something on your screen. You know how to interact with the keyboard and mouse. You know how to do condition checks, you know how to do loops, you know how to do all of these code basics. So I'm now talking about the higher level stuff about how do you decide what it is you're going to code. So interactive art is an important topic because it's in the name of this course, Art and Interaction Computing. art and interaction computing. So we're mainly thinking, so far we've talked a lot about art, we've talked a lot about computing, and we're now going to talk about interaction. And that's really what we will talk about for the rest of the course, because it's so important to bring these two, to tie all of these topics together. I think we went through a slide sort of like this in the first week, but if you've got the 3 words in this course, art and interaction computing, we kind of study all of the combinations of those primary concepts, primary colors. We study how to make art with code, that's what we've been doing, 1 and 3. We study how to make interactive computer systems, that's 2 and 3. And we study how to make interactive art, that's 1 and 3 together, or 1 and 2 together, sorry. I've got a typo in my slide, I need to change it. Oh my goodness. So this is the question we're going to talk about. What makes art interactive and why? And I've got a few examples coming up of things from the field of interactive art. This, following kind of our, I suppose, theme of going back through history, we'll be going from historical things to recent things, recent examples. And this one is from Julio Leparc. And I think that Julio Leparc was part of this group called Grave, which I'll talk about in a minute. But this one's called A Day in the Street. So you can see that this is not an artwork like we saw in week 1, or the archetypal artwork, which is a painted picture which goes on a wall of a gallery. This is a bunch of blocks that have been put in the street, and there are people who are standing on the blocks. And I guess, I don't know if these passers-by, are they people related to the artist who came by to stand on these blocks? But I guess the artist here has made an intervention into an everyday life scene, a normal street, and added something in there that people interact with. So it's not just that these big blocks are a sculpture that you stand there and look at. The idea is that for this experience to actually be complete, viewers of this art have to be participants in the artwork. They have to stand on these blocks and make that part of the street, or try to get from one side to the other. So it looks like they shift around when you stand on them. So this is the start of interactive art, or part of that field, things that could be called that name. Whoops, I'm big right now, I'll make myself small. This is the start of interactive art in the 60s. I think this is from 1966. So intervening in everyday life, taking objects that are not just interesting in a sculptural way because you can look at their form and think that appeals to you, but that in order to get the full interest, it requires people to participate in what's going in the artwork itself. So a kind of extension of this idea, this was an exhibition at a museum in Mexico of recreations of artworks by the artist from the previous slide and their group, the research group for visual art in France. So this isn't in the 60s, this is in contemporary times, recent times, where artists at this museum had recreated some of the interactive artworks that this group had worked with. So you can see some of them it doesn't have the little blocks, but we've got these, oops, where's my pen's not working. Oh, it's doing the wrong thing. It's connected to my other computer. That's odd. I wonder why I would do that. I'll see if I can get it to work. I really like my pen. Okay. There we go. So there's these kind of staircases. There's a kid here doing something dangerous. Like, can you imagine being a grown-up doing that? Getting up like 2.5 meters in the air and just hanging out on this staircase. These staircases have different shapes. This one's kind of 2 staircases connected together. Here's a thing that someone can stand up on and kind of rotate around. Here's some little seats that I guess would spring back and forth. If you, I don't know why my pen doesn't work down there for some reason. That's odd. Maybe I broke my pad. Anyway, the little springy seats, so I guess when you sit on those, you move around and you kind of interact with the environment in that way. And there's this little room here made of beads or something, so I think you can sort of slot through the little curtain and get inside it. So all of these kind of sculptural things are reflecting parts of everyday life. Stairs, seats, the ground. They're changed in some way, in a creative way, that this group of artists were interested in, and they invite people to interact with them, because obviously when you see a staircase, the suggestion is that that's something that a person or a participant could go up on. I don't know what's going on with my drawing pad today. It doesn't want to work well. So all of these objects suggest a kind of interaction. All of the objects suggest a kind of interaction. They invite people to come and look at them, to not just to look at them, but to stand on them, to interact with them, to operate them in some way, and to experience them. And really, the experience of these artworks isn't complete until someone is actually tries to use it or tries to participate in it. So the participation is required in order for the experience to work. So this is interactive artwork circa 1960s. Now, what are we talking about now with P5? Because these ones aren't really related to making computer art, are they? They're related to sculpture and visual art themes of the mid-20th century. So now that we're getting to something more close to where we're at, right? At least we've got a screen, an electronic screen. So this is an artwork by Namjoon Paik called Magnet TV, another work from the 60s. Most of you folks will probably have never even seen a screen like this, a classic cathode ray tube television. But when I was a kid, I had a magnet, a powerful magnet, and I one day decided I was going to put it on the television, which produced a very surprising result. It produces an interesting pattern. And I think my parents were a little bit mad with me, wondering if I'd just broken the TV, but took off the magnet, the pattern eventually went away. But a TV screen, or an old cathode ray tube screen, sort of fires electrons from the back against the glass front of the screen, which would then be illuminated and create the image. And if you have a magnet on it, it causes the electron beams to be deflected. So this artwork involves a TV screen with just a big magnet on top, and that is warping these electron beams to form the image, creating this interesting pattern. And in this artwork, the pattern isn't fixed. It's not a finished artwork, because a participant, a visitor to the gallery, can pick up the magnet and move it somewhere else. So you can see different kinds of patterns coming out. So still, it's not a computer artwork. It's an electronic interactive artwork, but not a computer artwork. Here's something more of the modern era. I bring this one up to, I just wonder if my zoom is correct. I want my little labels to be in the screen. This artwork is called the Illumi Cube, and you may recall something like this. It seems like it's a thing you've seen before, because actually it's an installation artwork in Canberra. It sits on Ainsley Avenue near the Canberra Centre. It's been moved in sort of the last 15 years. It had a new location. This is a picture of it in its original location. It was developed in 1988, and it's a sculpture, a glass sculpture with lights inside. And why is it interactive? Well, the lights would be activated by sounds originally, and in later times by movement. So it has a way of reacting to the world around it. We'll talk a bit more about this one later, but it's an interesting example of where things can go wrong with interaction. Another artwork, more starting to get towards the kind of computer artworks that you are more likely to be working with P5. This is called Iamascope, by two artists called Sidney Fells and Kenji Mase from '97. It's basically a kaleidoscope that uses images captured by a camera to create the image. And in fact, it's related to some of the kaleidoscope demonstrations and lab exercises which you do in this course. It's an older instance of that kind of procedure. When there's a person in the image who would move around the front. As they move around, there's a camera behind this screen that would see them moving and be able to capture their image and incorporate it into the kaleidoscope image being created. And there was also some sounds that were being created. So it was a sonic and visual environment that relied on the interactivity of this audience member. More recent creations. This is actually one of mine. This artwork's called Strike on Stage. It's a collaboration that I did with an artist called Chisha Lai in 2010. And it's a similar idea to the previous one, in fact. It had a camera. Here you can see the camera. It had a screen with projections. This one wasn't related to kaleidoscopes. It was more related to reflecting the kinds of movements that me and Chisha would make when we were playing percussion instruments. So we were percussionists, musicians, and we set this performance up in order to track our movements. So the camera is facing towards us, not facing towards an audience who were behind this camera. It would track our movements and use those images that the camera tracks as part of the image that will be formed on the screen. So you can see there's some movements here on the screen. I'm just going to show a brief video of some of this performance. Oops. I want theater mode. So, oh no, it's gone. In this part of the performance, we were using our hands to control different kinds of synthesized sounds represented by these little balls on the screen. But you can see that as we're moving our bodies in front of the screen, the camera is tracking our locations and using that as part of the image. I'll just go to a later part. So now we were playing the drums, but as we moved our arms down, it would animate around our arms with these kind of lines that where the length of the lines was controlled by the speed of our movement. And a later part, it was more like interaction with images, so overlaying different types of images. Yeah, this one uses projection. Someone has put in the chat. It's a lot of fun to use projectors for this kind of art. Also, it's a massive hassle. Projectors are really hard to get right. You have to make the room very dark. You have to get everything lined up. So after I did this artwork, I swore I would never do art with computer vision again because it was too complicated. So this is Strike on Stage, my artwork. Something quite different now, another recent artwork, 2015. This is called Ink Space, not Ink Space, I think there's a typo there, by an artist called Zach Lieberman. This artwork was actually for smartphone. I'll just show you what it looks like in video form. Oops, I think I've lost that one. No, it's got the wrong link. So the concept with this artwork would be that you would draw on the screen with your fingers, and then as you move your phone, the image will actually rotate, so you can create a kind of 3D image and explore your drawing in 3 dimensions by moving your phone around. So it was using, creating a kind of drawing interface or a drawing program for a participant to experience with that extra element of the 3D interaction added to the artistic experience. Another artwork called Mount Rothko. This one's by Yu Zhang. It's an artwork created in 2017, so we're getting to be pretty recent now. And this one was actually created in processing, I think not P5. It's an artwork created in processing, which is a related language to P5. Actually, P5 and processing are kind of friends, right? They're sister programming systems. P5 came out of the processing system. Processing uses Java, and in fact, this course used to be taught with processing, but we moved to P5 because it was just so appealing and fun to be able to use the browser as a way to view your artworks. When it was in processing, we couldn't use the browser to do that. Why do I show this artwork? Well, I actually want to show a bit of a video of it, but the interactivity here was similar to these other recent, more recent interactive artworks related to computing, where there's a screen. There's some way to see where the participants are positioned in space, and there's also some ways of interacting with this this artwork. I'm just making sure I'm tracking if there are any questions. Someone says, may we use processing in this course? No, you may not. You may use P5, which is very similar to processing. So there's parts of this artwork which are working by themselves, but I think I'm trying to find a bit of the video where there's a person interacting with it. There was also capacity with a camera in the gallery to track where people are moving in front of the artwork, which would create some different effects on the screen. And then there's also a flute, which is part of the artwork. So you could play the flute and it would hear the sound and use that to use the screen. Someone says, if we're using processing, how may we submit it? You may not use processing. That was the answer to my question. I'm just going to answer it here. You may not use processing. You have to use P5 in this course. Well, yes. So, a few themes emerging in these interactive artworks I'm showing you here, the ones related to computer art, really. There's an idea of taking a screen with a moving or generative scene and then having some way for a participant to be tracked or involved in that artwork, kind of in a subtle way. That's what a lot of artists do with present kind of themes in interactive art. The work by Zach Lieberman, this ink space work, the interaction wasn't as subtle. So it's not just you moving around an artwork and seeing that it changes in front of you. You're supposed to interact with this. You're supposed to use the touch screen, and the artwork doesn't work until you start touching the screen. With my work, it was sort of a combination of an interactive artwork that would just be tracking someone's location and an instrument for musical expression. So that's my job as a musician, was to create music for audiences. So it was part instrument and part computer interactive artwork. But it could also function in some way as an installation. So audience members could come and have a go, and they could move in front of the screen and make the same effects on the screen. Iamoscope, this was definitely supposed to be a kind of an interface for creating art. So the user was supposed to feel that they were in charge of this artwork. They were creating this pattern and they were creating the sounds around them. So it was supposed to be an interface in that way, but the way of interacting with it was supposed to be very natural. You would just had to walk around the gallery space and it would incorporate your image into the artwork automatically. And Illumi Cube, well, that was supposed to be mainly a sculpture with this interactive aspect. So you'd get the full experience of this sculpture when you put together the fact that part of the lighting was controlled by the activities going on around it. So there's sort of overt and covert or obvious and non-obvious modes of interacting with these artworks, which were all important in seeing the final result. I mentioned Mount Rothko here. I just want to draw attention to the fact that Mount Rothko is described in a book, which is a textbook to this course. So there's, on the course website, if we go resources, books and links, and other good stuff, there's a book called Coding Art. In fact, Jung is one of the authors of this book. So if you look up that book in the ANU library, you can read about how Mount Rothko was created. You can see the processing code, and it goes through a lot of details about the creative process of creating that work. We might look at that another day in some more detail, but it's a really important motivating example for this course because it's been explained in full in this book. So what is interaction? Can we define that? There's a picture on your screen right now, which is a slightly strange graphic by an Australian artist called Stephen Jones, who is mainly a video artist, but also interested in interactive art. He wrote a paper called Cybernetics in Society and Art at a conference which was in Sydney in 2013. And he had this image which was just showing what is going on in interaction. Well, one example of interaction is a conversation between two people. The conversation starts with some kind of initiation going this way between, this sort of synthesizer shirt guy and the mosaic shirt guy, and then there's a response. And then whenever this is happening, these different bits of communication, there's feedback going in a loop between these two people. So it's not just one sending one message and getting a response back. There's another message, then there's another message, there's another message, and all of the messages from this guy on the right, this person, depend on the types of responses through time that were created by this person on the left. So interactivity interaction is not just about reacting in a very predictable way to one action from another actor or another person or another computer. Interaction is about this conversation of actions and reactions. And as that conversation builds up over time, it might go in different directions because of the effect of feedback in this system of changes. So feedback. So interaction is complex. I guess that's the point of this image. Interaction is complex. It involves feedback and there's a building up of a conversation towards a certain outcome. And that's one of the important things that happens in all of these interactive artworks that I've shown you, is that it's not simply a matter of describing the artwork by saying, well, a person presses this button and then the artwork appears. That's not sufficient to be artistic interaction or interactive art. In all of these examples, an artwork has existed that in some way invites someone to start interacting. Depending on what they do, the artwork might display in a certain way. And then as that person changes what they do, the artwork also changes. And if 10 people came and interacted with that artwork, they might interact in 10 different ways and have 10 different experiences. So interactive art does sort of, has this, embraces a kind of plurality of experiences where different people can find out how this works in different ways. So what is interactive art again? Here's a little summary. In general, art that reacts to the participant. But it's more than that, isn't it? It's art where the input from the participant drives the artistic experience. It's not really a full artistic experience until the participant pushes it in a certain direction. And it's artwork where a feedback loop between the participant and the artwork enhances the experience. And this is something which is in fact quite important for assignment 2 and 3 and your major project. When I say interaction, it's not simply that the art reacts to the participant. I press a button, the art appears. Real interactive art, or really high quality interactive art, has this artistic experience which is driven and evolves through interaction with the participant. Someone's just asked a very difficult question. Are games interactive art? Ooh, I've got several slides about that later on in this lecture. Are games interactive art? I knew you wouldn't be able to resist it. And somehow I knew that person who asked that question was going to ask it. I had a feeling that was going to come up. So, how to make interactive art. This is what we'll talk about basically for the rest of this lecture. When you're creating interactive art, you're not just designing a picture on a wall, you're designing an experience. So you can't just think about one step ahead, you have to think multiple steps ahead and be open to different outcomes and different ways of interacting. And the experience is not for you, it's for the user, or the participant, or the viewer, or the museum visitor. So you have to think about things from the perspective of someone else seeing your artwork for the first time, finding out what to do with it, and having an interesting artistic experience. So really, in some sense, you can consider how designing interactive art is similar to designing an interface. What's an interface? An interface is any change between two distinct objects or a way of relating two things together. And so the interfaces that I'm thinking of here are human-computer interfaces, an interface between a person and a computer that develops some outcome. So when you're designing interfaces and designing interactive systems, let's ask two important questions about that process. One important question, this is thinking from the participant side, the user experience side. How does the participant know what to do? And that's probably the most important question that you can ask of an interactive artwork. How does the participant know what to do? It could be that there are lots of answers to that question that are valid. One is that they don't know what to do. One is that it's obvious what to do. One is that somehow you communicate to them what to do. So there's lots of possible answers that are valid. But when you're designing something, we want to be precise and want to be thoughtful about the answers to these questions. How do we know that interaction will enhance the experience? That's the second part. And this, I suppose, is crucial into making something which is an artwork and not a sort of non-artful interactive system. If you want it to be an artful interaction, this feedback loop, the conversation between a person and the system you've designed have to lead to something which is enhanced because of that interaction. Not just like, I clicked a button and a circle appeared. That's not enhancing my experience. That just is showing me a circle, which I could have seen anyway. It didn't matter whether I clicked the button or not. So I'm going to talk now about a way of framing these questions about interactions that help us answer those questions. So there's a concept I'll talk about now called affordances. This is a concept which is sort of comes from psychology originally. It comes from how people perceive the world, or theories about how people perceive the world. And people perceive the world in terms of what you can do with things, or what things are. So an affordance is a property of a thing that supports an action. So in fact, any action, but if you use that word, affordance, it's a funny sort of word. Usually, like if you type it into Microsoft Word, it says it's a spelling mistake, but it's used within the design literature and human-computer interaction literature. A funny example of affordance is you can see a chair and you say, well, that chair affords sitting. So it's a property of a chair is that you can sit on it. So an affordance of a chair is that it can be sat on. Another way of saying this is that it's a possible action that you can do with something. I've got this book here, the cover of this book by Don Norman called The Design of Everyday Things. Don Norman wrote this book about product design, but it's been widely integrated into the way we design computer systems as well. Really popularized the concept of thinking of affordances in interactive computer systems. You can see what this book is about from the cover, which is handy. It has a picture of a teapot, which suggests two things really. Like there's two affordances of the teapot. One is that you can hold it with the handle, and one is that tea maybe is going to come out the spout when you tilt it. But because this teapot has been designed exceptionally poorly, there's no way to combine those affordances to actually get the tea out without pouring it all over yourself and getting a burnt arm. So it's an example of a bad design where the way that affordances interact within an object has been ignored. Yeah, there's some funny things in the chat now. For a cat, everything is a chair. So there's different kinds of actors in the world. Different types of people may see different affordances in different things. That's absolutely true. For a dog, everything is a toy. Yep, that's true. So affordances. Let's have a think about what the affordances are of these objects. There's a computer. What are the affordances of a computer? Someone in the chat tell me. What's the affordances of a computer? I guess a computer has a keyboard here. You can type on it, that's correct, yep. I got that one, typing on the keyboard. You can use the mouse. You can mouse around on it and use that touchpad. Someone says it affords working, so that's more of like a higher level affordance. You can combine all of the different hardware attributes of it to do your work. You can see stuff on the monitor, absolutely true. You can be in front of the camera. If this one it's got a little camera in the monitor, that's an affordance. You could be heard by the microphone of this computer. Anything else? So I call these kind of the hardware affordances of a computer. There's what information can you get from a user of a computer system. Work and play, absolutely. And right now in P5, you know how to do this one, tick, and you know how to do this one, tick, and we don't know how to do this one yet, and we don't know how to do that one yet. But throughout this course, we will look at these ones as well, different kind of hardware affordances. You can turn it on and off, that's true. There's a button for turning things on and off. Another example, what about this object? What are the affordances? Well, it's got a touch screen that we can touch with our fingers and maybe draw things on it if the software allows us to do that. It's got some buttons there, touching the touch screen of this smartphone, clicking the buttons, that's an affordance, a hardware affordance. We can use the back camera to take photos of stuff. Absolutely true. Phones usually have a kind of movement sensor in them, so you can move the phone around and sense different things. That's a hardware affordance, moving the phone around. Maybe taking phone calls is an affordance. It's got a phone connection. And I've shown you artworks already that have exploited some of these hardware affordances in interesting ways, right? Like Zach Lieberman's work that includes movement of the smartphone as an aspect that you can control, and the work using computers where the camera of the computer is used to drive an artwork, maybe in an obvious, sort of more obvious way, like in my Strike on Stage, where you are using your image to animate the screen, or in a less obvious way, like in Iamascope or Mount Rothko, where the presence of people in front of the camera is incorporated into the artwork, but in a kind of highly processed way or ambiguous way. What about this? What are the affordances of this? This is an artwork, another artwork by Zach Lieberman. What are the affordances of that? Imagine you see this one on a screen. Feeling calm? Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, there's what I guess I could say is that if you were seeing this on a computer, there might be some thing that happens if you touched it or clicked on it, or if you were on a smartphone, if you tapped on different areas, right? And these wouldn't be obvious affordances. I think that they would be hidden affordances. So there's some affordances that are communicated through your knowledge of an object or through the way that the object is designed, right? When you see a computer with a keyboard, maybe the keyboard's what you want to use. If you have a computer with a mouse, the mouse seems like the main way to interact with stuff. But if it's on a smartphone, the touch screen is. So, so there could possibly be hidden affordances within this. We don't know. In fact, there aren't. It's just a flat artwork. But I just wanted to demonstrate an idea of different kinds of affordances. By the way, if you're interested, looking at Zach Lieberman's Twitter will give you some really interesting inspiration for different things that you can do with P5 and similar coding systems. So, types of affordances. There are affordances that are suggested by the hardware that you've got, a laptop, smartphone, etc. There are affordances in the software, so it's really up to the designer of the software to communicate what can be done with it in order to take certain actions. And there could be hidden affordances. There could be affordances that you have to try out to discover, ones that aren't suggested very obviously to you. And in fact, the hidden affordances can be quite useful in an artistic sense, because hidden affordances lead to discovery. And discovering something leads to a kind of engagement within that interactive conversation. So if you can imagine me coming up to an artwork and thinking, oh, that's cool. And then I notice that as I walk past it, something changes about the artwork. And then I might think, well, hang on a minute, that's very interesting. So a hidden affordance has been discovered. And once I've discovered that affordance, I'm engaged with the artwork. I come and have another look. I see what's going on. I start to explore in different ways. And I have my feedback loop created of communication from me to the artwork to back to back to back to back to back, leading me to have my own unique interactive experience with an interactive artwork. So, hidden affordances lead to discovery. Now, interfaces, this is sort of the summary of what we've been talking about. When you design an interface, you're designing affordances. But a question is how you communicate these affordances to the participant in your artwork. Are they obvious? Are they hidden? Should they be? That's something for the interface designer or the artist in an interactive art sense to decide, whether they are obvious or if they're hidden. and whether that's what you want to do. And the final question, the important question, is how does the participant know what to do? These affordances are what the communication with the participant to know what to do in an interactive artwork. And as the artist, you get to choose what they should be, but I hope that it makes sense. We spend a lot of time later in this course thinking about how participants should know what to do in your artwork. So it's not a question I want to answer today. I just wanted to bring up this concept that it's not always clear about how affordances should work. You don't have to label every single thing in your artwork to suggest using it. I know there's some folks make an artwork which will have a bunch of buttons in different places on the screen, and they'll be like writing on the screen, press button 1, then press button 2. Like, I get it, guys, right? You press the buttons. It's not going to be, I don't need that overt communication to happen. Okay, moving on. We're going to talk about how to communicate affordances badly. And this is a little demonstration called the worst volume control in the world. You can look at this. It was an little internet thread on Reddit where people were challenging each other to create really bad volume control interfaces and try to outdo each other on this thread. And we're just going to have a little look at some of the results. You can look at the whole thread by clicking that link, but here's a few. Advanced volume control. You get little buttons to select each percent change in volume from 0 to 100. Here's a volume control. You have to charge your device to a certain level. So when it's at 100%, it will get to 100% volume. This one's a, oh yeah, bad UI battles. There's the thread. Thanks, Spike. This one you have to play a little game of, I've forgotten what the sport's called. It'll come to me in a minute. Anyway, you have to clean the ice in front of the puck to get it to go down the line. And it's very difficult and precise to get that to work. Here's one where you think you're going to be able to select the volume slider, but it turns out you're drawing in this little area and you have to fill in the area to get to 100% volume. And this one, you've got a moon over your mouse all the time and you have to make an ellipse to get to 100% volume. This one, you kind of have to fire the ball onto the line to get to that volume level. This one has a button, so that seems like it should work, right? You can just press the button and the volume should go up, but in fact, there's gravity as well, so the gravity pulls things down. Oh, it's curling, that was the sport's name. Here we go, Rick Astley. We have to change the volume of Rick Astley. We have to move your device to a new location so that your latitude changes your volume. That should be simple, right? Just get in your car and drive around to a new latitude to get a new volume. Please make a noise as loud as you want the volume to be now listening. This is one of my favorite ones. So if you want it to be 100%, you have to scream at your computer. Another classic, dragging these little dots around, and to get the volume, you have to draw with the dots the number that you want that volume to be, and then select it. So you get 65. Oop, this one, you have to tilt the whole wheel and then gravity pulls it down to tilt the bar and the little ball moves with gravity. This one's like someone's pressing spacebar, and every time they press spacebar when it's over the green area, it increases the volume by 5%. But if you make one mistake, it goes back to 0. Here's another classic. Seems like it should be fine, right? Except the volume moves left to right, not up down, and the little selecting square suggests that it should be moved up and down. This one, you roll all of these dices, 16 die, and then you have to select the numbers of ones to hold and then keep rolling until you get the number you want. So why are these so funny? They're hilarious, right? The reason they're funny is that in most cases, there's an obvious affordance for using them. They're either reflecting a UI widget that you would previously understand as a computer user, or they'd have radio buttons or something. But in many cases, the actual effect is controlled by a hidden affordance. So you don't know what the affordance is going to be until you start interacting with it. Like that one that just had the sideways movement within the vertical box. So there's a hidden affordance there, but it's frustrating the user because it doesn't work the way that it ought to. And the fact that they have this frustration sets it up as a joke, right? If it was real, it would be very frustrating, but because it's not real, they're really funny. The hidden affordance being completely weird and out of step with what people should expect. So, to finish up today, last point to make, a few interactive art myths to debunk or just bring up for discussion. Interactive art is better than traditional art. That's a myth. Interactive digital art is more interactive than non-digital art. That's a myth. All art is interactive, and video games are the same as interactive art. So a few things to discuss here. There's similar kinds of art to interactive art which aren't interactive art. Video games, participatory art, relational aesthetics, collaborative art, immersive art. You can learn more about these things if you want to. They're similar, they're not the same as interactive art. Go take an art history course if you want to do more work in different types of art, but we're just focused on one kind of field of things in this course. So, technology not equal interactive. It's completely possible to make a non-interactive computer artwork. In fact, you know it is possible because you did it in assignment 1. But there's fantastic artworks that are use highly advanced digital art techniques, computer art techniques that aren't interactive, like this video installation where there's huge videos on 2 screens. It looks amazing, it looks really immersive, but it's not interactive because it doesn't matter whether people are here or not, the artwork will be the same. Of course it looks like a fantastic experience, but the artwork doesn't react to the viewer in the way that we expect for interactive art. All art not equal interactive art. So some people would say, well, Charles, the viewer in the artwork is a crucial part of the experience. So if you're going to be watching an artwork and you understand that the viewer's perspective is part of the art, that means that it's interactive. Well, yes, but no. Like that's a point of saying that everything is everything else, right? Interactive art is definitely something different to traditional art on the wall. This image is by an artist called Thomas Struth, who has a series of images of people in museums looking at art. So he's creating new art out of the experience of people looking at art, but he's not creating interactive art. And that doesn't mean that someone's experience is interactive because it doesn't meet the criteria we set out earlier in this lecture, that art should react to people, that it should be the reaction, interaction should enhance the experience. Doesn't happen within these artworks. Not that, these artworks aren't amazing. Games not equal interactive art. This is one of the ones which is highly controversial within this course. I know I've had previous students who absolutely turn themselves into knots to tell me that games definitely are interactive art. Look, I'm not saying that games are not art. I'm saying that there's a different field of art called video games, which has its own expectations, its own experience, and its own definition of what makes a video game, its own history. And there are also video games which are, really designed primarily as an artistic experience. And there are video games or game artworks, you could call them that are interactive artworks because they've stripped away so many of the game elements that they become, all that's left is interactive art, interactive computer art. So in some sense, what point does interactive art become video games when it has a goal? Look, there's a lot of there's a lot of details within what makes a video game, but I think that sometimes the more video game mechanics that you put into an interactive artwork, the more it becomes a game and the less it becomes an artwork. I think that the comment there about the goal has some relevance here. Video games tend to be mainly focused on a story or a progression of the users through a level of maybe highly calibrated, challenging experiences that we call fun, or that we experience as being fun. Seeing a challenge, meeting it, and moving on to the next one, whether that's playing solitaire or playing Counter-Strike or playing Skyrim or playing Myst, this example. So video games, there's a whole argument about whether video games themselves can be called art. I'm very open-minded about what art is, and I say, well, of course, they're artistic, they're beautiful. If they have an excessive je ne sais quoi, then definitely artistic, definitely artworks. But some other people disagree with that. I don't agree with them, but there you go. This video game called Myst is an example of a game which has been considered to be particularly artistic. It came out in 1993, and it was notable because of its lack of an interface. It doesn't give you any clues about what to do. It was also notable because of its lack of the typical game challenging mechanics that most people would say is what makes a game a game. If they don't have those challenging little mechanics like, fighting a boss, getting to the next level, solving a puzzle. There are puzzles in Myst. It's a puzzle game, but they're kind of abstract and abstruse in some way that doesn't connect them so much to previous games. It was quite a revelation for people. It's within the MoMA collection, so it's recognized as being an artwork, but it's not exactly interactive art in the same way. So I think that this point about video games is very important, because when folks in this course come up to do their major project, and I say create an interactive artwork according to a theme, one of the things that they do is say, okay, cool, I'm going to make a video game. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, that's not the assignment. The assignment is to make an interactive artwork. You're making a video game. They aren't necessarily the same thing. And one of the reasons I suggest that students really be careful about that, or in fact don't do that, don't start out by saying I'm going to make a video game, is because making a video game can be way harder than making an interactive artwork. Because to make a video game, you have to have all this stuff, a story that makes sense, the highly calibrated challenges, all these resources. People start making a little RPG, they've got characters, they've got designs, and then actually what happens in their major project is they've made, 20% of a game that's not a very compelling interactive artwork. So it's a suggestion that things should be simplified in some way. Like someone just said, Breath of the Wild, every frame of the game could be an artwork for me. So beautiful. Look, I play Breath of the Wild to relax. I have finished that game so long ago. I just get myself in the environment and just walk around. And at that point, when I'm not actually participating in the story, it's more like an interactive artwork, isn't it? Because I don't have a next goal. I just want to look at things and experience it and discover the world in some way without the typical game mechanics. Someone said 1993, very impressive. Yeah, Myst is... the trick with Myst was that this is a picture. It's not rendered in 3D within your computer. It was... all of these scenes were designed on a powerful 3D workstation. Rendering would not happen in real time. It would take a long time to produce this image. And they saved it as a flat image file. And then you would click on certain locations to move forward through the story. It's a really fascinating game. I highly recommend you have a look at it and be frustrated, because it's a frustrating experience as well to know what to do. Summary. Interactive artwork involves the audience in order to create the complete experience. Involves the audience. Interfaces don't just drop out of the sky. You have to design them. You have to think about how you're communicating the interactive components to your audience. That communication is related to affordances, which is how someone perceives the action possibilities of your work. You can have affordances that relate to hardware or software, things like the keyboard, mouse, camera, hardware, UI elements, buttons on the screen, locations you have to click are software parts of software affordances. When you do it well, hidden affordances can lead to engagement, and that's really exciting. Last one, don't make a game. Or be careful about that. We go into it in great detail later in the course. So just opening up a few of these, I wanted to show the Illumi Cube again before I stop, because the Illumi Cube has a history in Canberra. It existed at Ainslie Avenue and London Circuit in this location here near the Legislative Assembly. And it was controlled by sound. And I remember it being there when I was a little kid. You could go up and clap and it would light up. And over time, you know, in that period when it was first installed, Civic and the Canberra Centre were just where people went to work and went to shop. There wasn't anybody living nearby. But over time, people started to live in buildings around the Illumi Cube. And what would happen is that a bunch of drunk people would come out of a pub and make a huge amount of noise at 2 o'clock in the morning in front of the Illumi Cube. So the affordance of it, of being controlled by sound, was actually negative for the environment in which it was placed. And it had to be changed, so it was moved to a different location, which was away from where people were living so much, and they got rid of the sound activation. It was movement activation instead, so that it wasn't going to annoy anybody. Little story about the Illumi Cube. Do remember this Mount Rothko piece. I'm just going to open up in another tab the book related to it. This book is called Coding Art, and here's an explanation of how Mount Rothko works. Go and read it. It's really, really interesting. Go and read the book. It's based on processing, not P5, but if you don't know that it's different, processing and P5 actually look the same. They have almost the same syntax, slightly different syntax in Java for objects, but that's basically the only thing that's different that you'll notice. And variables, I guess, are slightly different. So you can go through this book and see some practical advice. It's not about learning to code. This assumes you already know everything we've done in this course up to week 6 about loops, conditionals, objects, variables, etc. This is about how to design an artwork. Okay, and strike on stage. I'll talk about this more as we go through this course, or some more stuff that I've created over the years, but I've just wanted to link it there again, just to remind you about different ways of interacting. This one is a bit more obvious about involving the participant. It's not subtle, right? You get your image actually embedded in the artwork by interacting with it. And further reading, watching. So that's the end of today's lecture. I'm here for any more questions. You folks are doing a great job with assignment 1. By the way, I did post a gallery of name tags, which you're very welcome to go and have a look at. You can see everyone's name tag online, which is really cool and fun to see everyone's name tag together. Someone asked me about examples for assignment 2. I will go and find some examples from the tutors who might like to share them with you. And you can talk about those ones within your labs next week. So, you know, I don't have a whole list of examples that I'm free to share with you because I don't want to share previous students' work without their permission, but perhaps the tutors could share their own examples as some good inspiration for you. Okay, I will catch you folks on Monday.